Hello, Book Club, hosted by Heather Skinner. We are so excited today to have the authors of The Exiled, of Shade and Shadow, Book One of A Daughter's Ransom, here with us today for an interview. They are Niamh Schmid and Rebecca Schmid, and members, you voted them in for our November 2021 Book of the Month feature. So I'm so excited to read along with you and to hear all about them, their writing process, and their book. Thank you so much for watching. Please remember while you're here, click the like and subscribe button. It means so much to us, and it will help you stay up to date every time one of our videos post. All right, so in our interviews, Gemma always gets the first question. And I'm going to hold up the book, and hopefully there's not too much of a glare here so we can see the cover, because her question is about something she noticed on your cover. What's your question?
Is there a queen in the book?
She saw the red carpet and she wants to know if there's a queen in your book.
Well, we don't have a queen per se, but we do have a king, Luco's dad, King Omath. And he's pretty important, not necessarily in a pleasant sense.
So what do you
We do find out what happened to the queen, if that's what you want to know.
Ooh, there we go. So kind of there's a queen in there. There's a storyline where there was. Oh.
Like that.
Perfect. Oh, that's awesome. Thank you so much. You want to say thank you?
Thank you.
That was great.
You.
Great question, great answer.
Thank you.
One of the things we like to do each time we do a first interview is kind of do some quick questions so we can all get to know you better. And this is really fun interviewing two authors who work together too. So I'm really excited to hear what you guys have in common and what's opposite, and I love it. So our very first question is, what book are you both currently reading right now?
So I've actually been working on reading the third book in a series called the Archmage series. It's a young adult, like fantasy, kind of a mix of Harry Potter, a little Percy Jackson. It has a lot of interworld travel, and it's really cool. And I got into it especially because the main character has a chronic illness that's actually kind of similar to mine, and the author did a really good job of writing it. So I've been really enjoying this series a lot.
That's great. Oh my gosh, I'm going to add that to my want to read list. That sounds amazing.
It's a great book.
I've been reading, it's called, I don't know if it's going to show up at all on Zoom, but Rocky Road by Rose Kent. It's by a local author where I am. I think she's in the Schenectady area. At least that's where the book is set. And it's, I think, young adult. I could see a high schooler reading it. It's about this this girl and her brother and her mom that move up to the Schenectady area to start an ice cream shop of all things in the middle of winter. And the mother's bipolar, and it's dealing with that sort of difficult situation. And I think I haven't gotten very far yet, but I think it goes up into her adulthood and trying to deal and be kind towards her mother, and in a difficult situation. But it's a very interesting start.
Oh, I love that too. I'm going to have to add both of those to my want to read list. That is so cool. And that's something I really love this month too, that you're local authors for me. And then to hear that you're reading another local author, like I love the support and seeing that train just kind of keep going. That's so cool. Do you guys have a show you're currently binge watching?
I'm trying to think because WandaVision and everything ended, so we're kind of waiting for the next one. But we definitely binge watched that. In regards to movies, we just watched Dune and absolutely adored it. It was so good.
I've been hearing good reviews about that one.
That was excellent. I think the last show I watched, couldn't really say binge watched because we watched it as it premiered. So was the Star Wars Visions, which was like the different anime styles, but like Star Wars. And that was not something I would have ever thought of, but it was a really cool, like various artistic thing. Some things like were not quite my style, but they were still really interesting applications. That's neat.
Oh, I love it. Do you guys have a favorite podcast?
I am unfortunately very bad at figuring out podcasts. I do have a book reviewer, Murphy Napier, that I love to watch on YouTube. And she does really great, like in-depth book reviews, and I love watching her. She's great.
I'm not really good about sticking podcasts either. The last one, I don't remember who runs it, but it was actually a Mandarin education podcast. And it will start off with like basic words and pronunciations, and then like a small story that uses those words, and then kind of goes from there. So language learning tool, but it was fun.
Oh, that's really neat. I love that. Do you have a favorite creative outlet that you do after, like, second to writing?
I suppose that's really split, because if you're talking about creative outlet, we could include our technical occupation, which we're both classical pianists. But if you're saying more purely for fun, I at least love to paint and to do digital art. In fact, it's there we end up posting a lot of it on our Twitter account and our Instagram account because we like messing around with drawing our own characters and stuff.
Oh, great. Is that under your press page?
Yes. Yep.
We have a lot of art that pertains to the book too, so you can find that on there. I don't do the digital art. I do character art. I do maps. We actually, one of the things we're doing at one of our book signings is a like canvas giveaway of one of our maps that will just be sort of raffled off to people who end up ordering books. But I've done those for so far 3 books. We'll see what happens.
Oh, that's fantastic. Oh my God, you guys are great. Is there a mundane task you do where you get some of your best writing ideas?
Driving to school, because we have a 3-hour drive. And many an epiphany has come to us in this 3-hour drive to school. In fact, I think just yesterday, we figured something out for book 6 that needed to be tweaked because of the drives.
Oh
I think
my,
also something for book 8, incidentally.
oh wow. That is dedication. Actually, that's going to lead me right into a question I was going to ask later. How many books are you planning in the series that we're starting off reading book 1 of?
So we have 8 books in the series, and we are going to be releasing them every 6 months, which has worked well. So we have pretty much all of them written already in their rough draft form. So for those like that are worried that you'll get to book 2 and then never hear about the rest of the books, we have like it's pretty set in stone. They've all pretty much been written. But yeah, so 8 books. Book 3 is coming out this December, and then book 4 is like July, and so we have kind of like a July-December offset.
We do also have other books planned for afterwards. We have actually a prequel series coming out following Tyron, the main antagonist, which theoretically comes out in April, May, the first one. So that's coming up soon too. We're very busy.
How long have you been writing this series together?
10 years. It started out as a story. So I met Becca and I liked to write and tell myself stories. And so I was like, Becca, I got to tell you this story. And so I got tired of telling it to her. And so I made her tell one too. And then we started combining the stories. So it's been pretty much as long as our friendship. So 10 years, I think now.
That's fantastic. How much you've gotten to make together. Oh my gosh. I can't wait to read all of them. This is so exciting. Let's see. So let me jump into some, because I'm so excited hearing like about you and then hearing it mesh into all of this information too about your books. I love this. There were a couple of questions that I wanted to get to first that were submitted by members in advance. So we have Bonnie Epson Weinman. She wants to know, are you plotters or are you pantsers?
I think we're a combination of both. So obviously, we're kind of plotters because we've written pretty much the whole series already. But several of those books were written like 3 times in completion, and then we had complete like large scale plot devices that changed. So we are a bit by the seat of our pants what's going to happen. and it'll rewrite something. But now at this stage, it's pretty restricted to planning in advance. I don't know if you have anything to add, Beck.
Well, I would say we plan and then we see what happens, and we follow it from there. Sometimes we get to there, we're like, well, this character wouldn't react that way, and now we have to go with it because we don't want to force it. We want it to be something natural. Kind of interesting.
That's great. Do you feel like your styles when you're writing match up pretty well, or how was that to combine?
It's actually really funny. So we have a unique style when we write together that is very different than either one of our solo works. But like we never discussed that. It just kind of happens. So if you read book 1 is done by both of us. Book 2 is technically done by me because I'm in charge of the world in book 2. And the style is very different. And then Becca's in charge of the Tyron prequel that's going to be coming out. So if you read that one, you're going to see it's immensely different from either one of our styles or when it's together. So it kind of depends.
I really like that. That's neat that it kind of evolves and changes with each other. That's really cool. That's a very interesting. I'm probably going to ask you a gazillion more questions about like your writing process too and world building along the way. So that's exciting to hear that it has that leeway and very creative. I feel like you kind of maybe morph with things. We have another question from a member, David Itier. He said that he is always interested in hearing about what got an author started writing and led them down to writing a book, down the path of writing a book. So I know you started touching on that, but what made you kind of want to go all the way and get published with the stories that you were telling each other?
Becca, you want to start this one?
Sure. I mean, we started telling them back and forth, and that was fun. But when you're 12, especially like at the time where we didn't have cell phones, we couldn't text, so we would email each other back and forth. We still have some of the old emails. There's like hundreds of them. It's so bad. But we I think we started getting into a lot of the writing that way. And Niamh would write quite a bit. She has the notebooks full still. I was like, well, Niamh's doing it. I'm gonna try it, and I did it. It was very bad because I was 12, 13. But as we started to go along, we started to see the improvement. I mean, as we got older, but as we started writing more, I don't think we really sat down and put it into a book until what were we, like 17, 18?
No, it had to be book 2 I wrote when I was 17, so I think it was 16.
Okay, so 16, and then I think we were like, it was after you'd finished the book 2 that we were like, wow, we can finish one of these. That's a whole new thing from starting one. And we wrote, I think 2 or 3 books worth within 3 months after that. We got really excited. But yeah, I think NaNoWriMo was one of our big kicks too. Like it was all around that time. So we were excited. We stuck to NaNoWriMo. We got through that end of the first book. And from there, we've kind of just gotten through all of them. So
wonderful. So are you writing these books during NaNoWriMo each time? Is that kind of your push?
The first 2 books. So book 2 was the first one I'd ever done NaNoWriMo with. And then it worked so well that I was like, Becca, we should do this. And so then we wrote book 1. We finished it during NaNoWriMo. And then that kind of just made us finish all the books. So November, we finished book 1. December, we finished book 3 because it's the world. And then January, we finished book 5. And so I don't think we've had time to do official NaNoWriMo since, but we usually get really cooking in November for editing or rewrites or anything.
So that was going to be a question I was going to ask too, if you're participating in NaNoWriMo or what your writing goals are basically for this month, if not NaNoWriMo.
So, yeah, unfortunately, I am stuck in rewrites for book 4. So there were a couple like scenes and stuff that I have to rework and just general editing because come January, it goes to our editor for content editing. So I'm working on book 4 and then Becca's working on something else. I'll let her.
I'm wrapping up that Tyron prequel. We have a very tight schedule with our poor editor, who's now a very busy woman. We actually have 2, so getting them back to back. But we've finished sort of our edits for book 3. We're waiting to get that back, and that's going to be content editing. So theoretically, by December, we'll have both wrapped up our individual books, have book 3 ready to go out to our sort of proofreader, and we'll be working on sort of a marketing push, getting book 3 out there and ready to go.
Oh, that's great. So that's interesting. I think I only saw the one name for editor in book 1 that you gave an acknowledgement to. So you've added a second editor for like the different type of editing since then?
Yes. Yep.
That's really interesting. So what made you do that? Because she's so busy, or or you wanted to kind of do the different breakdowns?
So usually when you publish a book, especially by yourself, they recommend having two different editors so that have a final set of eyes that hasn't seen it at all to do the proofreading, which is just super light, like reading through after you've gotten it back, after you've done all the intense line editing. So it's pretty much in book form already, and they're just going through and doing one last check. And we happen to be really blessed with friends who are editors and have reached out and been like, we are willing to help you, which has been great, because otherwise it gets really expensive really fast. And so a lot of people can't afford that, understandably so.
Yes. And then do you also from then, like from that point, jumping point, do you also send to beta readers as well? Or do you just kind of go ahead and start publishing from there?
So our beta readers, we actually generally have before our editing stages, because we want their feedback on sort of content too, and we don't want to get through a proofreading and then have to rewrite something. So we have a few really solid beta readers. We've been looking at doing possible advanced readers copies for people to start to get a feel for it before the book is out, and start spreading the word, maybe have some good reviews going towards it before it's even out there.
Yes, and I love you said that. Reviews are always so important. Review, review, review. I love it. And if you want to, too, to give a shout out, because I'm fortunate enough to have met you in the writers group at our local library. And I love that you guys get to share your work there, get feedback. Everyone's so great there. And if you want to give a shout out, I know tomorrow you're doing a live event in person with another writer in that group and one of the editors that I saw in book 1. She's in the group. So any shout outs, if you want to keep the local support going, go for it.
Yeah, well, no, it's actually great because that writing group was also really instrumental in giving us the push to publish. So that writers group, its first incarnation was because my mom used to be the program director, and so Becca and I on Monday nights would sit in the stairwell and we'd write with each other. And so my mom was like, "You guys we need a writers group." So she happened to have an intern at the time, and her intern needed a project. So the intern became the first leader of the writers group, and we were the first members. And then Allison, who is our editor, ended up coming in after that intern left, and she ran the writers group. And then she ended up going to grad school, and now she works at a school now, so she didn't have time to run it anymore. And so now I think John runs it. But because of all of the members, and it's grown so much, and we started out, nobody was published. We all just kind of read our stuff. And I think what's really cool is now we have published authors in it because the writers group helped motivate those people. So John is now self-published. Someone else is getting traditionally published, I believe, actually. They got a deal. It's so exciting. And now we're published. So it's really cool because everyone's been growing with the group. It's a great group.
Oh, that's such a great writers group success story. I love that because I think, the writing community is so supportive. And if you just go out there and find what works for you for your support system, I think that's really important. So I love that you all support each other, and I need to start making more of those because I miss the group so much. I haven't been lately because my schedule, but I miss it, and you are all fantastic. The feedback that I hear you give each other is so great because you give there's compliments, and then you're not afraid to also say, hey, maybe tweak this a little, which I think is important because I know there can be some people who are afraid of that part. Like, I don't know if I want to say it, but that's what you need, So I love you guys have that great balance. It's really neat, and I definitely encourage people who are looking for writing support to look for a local library writers group like you guys. Fantastic. And it's good to see where it's helped you get to. Have you read excerpts from from your series in that group, or do you tend to like to read other works?
So we definitely read quite a bit of book one. I think we actually got like halfway through. And then it got published. We're like, well, now you can go read it by yourselves. We've read some of book two in there. I'm actually reading a lot of the Tyronin prequels right now. I'm probably about a third of the way in. So most of the stuff we read does have to do with the series, whether or not it's in there. But yeah.
Yeah, and I believe we even we read a lot of book 7. They got a
That's
peek at it. They got like really at least halfway through book 7 because book 7 is introducing the third world, which is the sci-fi world. So it wasn't actually related to any of the others, so it didn't have any spoilers, and we had to stop reading it because we were about to come to a really big spoiler. But yeah.
Oh, that's great. Let's get to some questions about the book. I don't want to get too far into it. I have started reading a little, but I'll save those for the end of the month, like the questions I'm starting to come up with for that. So one thing I found interesting, just from giving it a quick look, you number your chapters in Roman numerals, which I think is so cool. What inspired you to do that?
I think that's probably my fault, Becca, right? I don't remember.
I think we liked the aesthetic, I'll be honest.
I was gonna say, at least on my part, I learned Latin when I was in school, and like you just like got the Roman numerals drilled into you for some reason that's somehow part of Latin. And so I just always use Roman numerals for no reason.
That's okay. I think it looks really awesome. And I'm not sure, like, I don't know if it's really incorporated into steampunk. I've actually noticed that that started quite a bit of conversation already in the comments on our corresponding Facebook group. Some people had never heard of steampunk and are curious about it and intrigued and excited. And for a lot of readers in my group, they've never had anything with any kind of steampunk incorporated in at all. So this is going to be a first steampunk read. So how much steampunk do you incorporate in? What would you tell members about it who don't know about it, like what they can look forward to about it in your read?
So book 1 is primarily the fantasy. So the way it works is book 1 is the fantasy world, and book 2 is where we introduce the steampunk world. So I guess super briefly, steampunk it's usually kind of set in Victorian era, but it has like what happens if you had magic in the Victorian era, and how does that, affect your technology and affect your society and things like that. So in book 2, you have a lot of like you have heating and more sophisticated just everyday life things. Book two's world is a bit crumbling, so there's not as many of the advancements right at the second because the world's kind of going in a bad direction. But as you continue on, you get to see a lot more of those steampunk elements and like city and flying blimp ships and things like that. It's fun to write.
Ooh, that'll be exciting to look forward to. I like that. I like how it sounds like it kind of builds more and more. So that's kind of cool too, because for people who aren't associated with it, they'll get to kind of slowly build up to it and have fun with it. That's really neat. I like the way you incorporated that in. I wanted to ask too, I do this thing with all the books I read. I look up the main character's name to see the definition, to see if it kind of matches up in any way with the character's personality. So I looked up, seeing the first chapter starts as Astra. I just looked her name up. And the first definition I came to is that it's Greek and means of the stars. So is that something you looked up and kind of use to base names? Do you look things up? Did you just kind of have fun and say, this is what I like for the name? What's your process for making names?
So we have a few different processes. Astra in particular is kind of funny. She was a placeholder name. That was just a name I liked when I was 12. And I was like, I'll come up with a cooler name later. And that just did not happen. So anyway, her name, we do actually talk about within the series. It's a little later in the book. But it's book 1, and they talk about why she has this name, what it means, how she came by it. It's actually not her given birth name. Luco's name and a lot of the other ones, we like the sound, we like the shape. We try to fit things to particular cultures. His name is not strictly Maramethian, so it's a little bit different from, say, Keisha, Mariah, Omath, other Maramethians that we see throughout the book. We do occasionally, we do this more with place names than people names. We do have a few conlangs, sort of the made-up languages, and we'll pull different words from there, maybe combine them or change them slightly to make a new name that way. And those usually do have a very particular meaning.
Yeah, I was gonna say, yeah, oftentimes, at least for our main characters, we'll, if it's a name we've made up, for instance, like Luco, we come up with what the meaning is, and Luco's name is actually super. It's talked about in book 3, because you get more background about the root of it and everything. So it's kind of fun to mess around with different names.
That is really fun. And I love the thought and the time you put into it, saying that, if you made up a name, you come up with what it means. That's amazing. Did you find that you made a lot of backstory and had to have a lot of conversation that's not incorporated in the book? Like, what's that behind the scenes process that you had together to get to where it is?
Well, I'll say very broadly, we do actually we love world building and backstory. First of all, we have about 3,000 years worth of history for the worlds. Some of it like pretty fleshed out. But more recently, we actually, when we started writing this, we wrote the prequel first. So we were writing Astra's story in the war with Ent, and Luco was just a side character. And so we wrote that and realized it was like a nice book, but it wasn't actually as interesting as what happened after. So we got all of the backstory naturally because we happened to have written it already. And that was very useful.
But yes, we will often write, even like some of the nights we have short stories that range from like a page to 10 pages of just, what makes this person tick. And we like to have that. For us, it makes them feel like people when we're writing them, even if it's not something that the reader's ever going to see. We've thought of maybe putting out an anthology of short stories someday, but for us at least, we enjoy having that background.
That's fantastic. I think that kind of thing makes a character feel so real when you read it. And that makes me even more excited to keep reading, like just to see how developed everything is. Your world building sounds just so thoughtful and everything. I love this. I'm so excited to read. So that also brought me to, I did want to ask you more about your world building. Just from the start that I've read so far, I'm very intrigued, and I love the way you write it in a way that, I don't know, you can slip into it so easily, and it already feels like it existed, but you can tell there's like this fantasy element to it. So can you talk a little bit more about your world building process and what went into that?
Niamh and I function kind of differently on this scale. She tends to do much more of the history, and I tend to be a lot more about the culture. So she'll be like, this country exists and it has done this and has that happened and that and that. And I'm like, okay, but if that happened, then they would be really interested in this facet of this, or their agriculture would probably be this, or if they're geographically located here, this means their weather is probably this way. And it kind of grows and builds off of itself that way. Latash is one of our more interesting examples. It's this sort of, we call it the Australia of Idris because it's kind of isolated by itself. It has all this weird stuff that nobody knows what to do with. And politically, it's, very new to the scene. It's kind of been off by itself for a few hundred years. So everybody kind of views it as this mystical land. And meanwhile, everybody in Latash is kind of just trying to stay alive. They don't have very much culture because they've been so busy with, okay, what's food? We just overthrew this dictator. How are we going to get water? Like all of this stuff is kind of supersedes their previous cultures. Plus, we have different races that plays into things a lot. Bandolarians are ones you see quite a bit. Those are shapeshifters. They have a very odd culture. Humans, on the other hand, they're up in Maramethia mostly. You don't see a lot of humans in Latash, so that makes some interesting relations, or lack thereof. We have our elves. I'm going to leave those off because they're interesting, and we see a lot more about them later. So.
Oh, that's great. That actually brings me to a point too. When I was looking up Astra, I just very quickly looked up Maramethia just for fun, and it brings up all your pages. So I wanted to give you props on however you use the hashtags or however that works in the background for people to find you. It brought you right to you. It was awesome. I was like, yay, this is so cool. It was just your pages right in a line when I did that.
Fantastic.
Yeah. So well done, however you set that up. I don't know a lot about the background of how to do that, but nicely done. I love it. Now, you're starting to kind of talk about the magic of it too. So how did that work meshing the magic and the world building together? The rules and laws to those kinds of things too, right? So
So, again, Beck and I function very differently. So I tend to go plop. This is the physical manifestations of what is happening. So this is what their magic does. And then Becca comes up with all of the specific rules. And then we sit down together and go, okay, well, if they have this and this and this and this, how does that affect the world? For instance, in Etris, there is a lot of healing-based gifting. Like, gifting is what we refer to as magic. That's the magic system in Etris. And so a lot of it is rooted in healing and healers. And so because of that, you notice there's a lot of lack in just medical advancements because they just rely on their gifting. And that's just something that very naturally kind of plays in. Whereas you'll see in other worlds, which aren't so like healing based, the gifting works differently, and they have more advancements in, say, healing and medicine or other technologies. And the same thing with Etris also has a lot of like transportation based magic, so that you can transport yourself different places. So they don't have like as much advancements in traveling, because if you're traveling on foot, that's really dangerous because there's a lot of nasty animals about. So I'm just gonna transport my place. Why am I gonna risk getting robbed or eaten if I can just go poof, I'm somewhere else?
that blows me away. The attention to detail, just each question that I, get to talk with you about, and just how much thought you put into each aspect of everything. I love it. I love it so much. I did want to talk a little bit more about your process too, because this is, like I was saying, the first time I get to talk to two authors that work together. So what's a typical day look like when you're writing together?
So we have sort of different process for writing versus editing versus different things. But when we're just sitting down making our first draft, it's sort of off a character basis. So we have, I'll use book one cast, so to speak. Astra would be my character. So if it's Astra's view and she's sitting there thinking about something, that's me. But then if Luco enters the scene and Luco is Niamh's character and he says something, she's going to take over and she's going to write what Luco says. Then I write Astra's reaction. And then we kind of go back and forth that way. We do have obviously a lot of characters, and some of those aren't necessarily anybody's particularly assigned person. So if, let's say, I'm writing Astra and somebody else comes in that doesn't necessarily belong to either of us, Niamh will probably still take over for that person. So it's not me sitting there for 10 pages by myself writing. But we do use Google Docs so that we can both be on the page at the same time. We can kind of see each other go or make fun of each other in the chat.
I love that. Got to have a little banter, right? Maybe goes into the book. Like, oh, that was funny. Let's put that in.
Oh no, actually, it's really, really funny on that note. As you continue and you get into Luco and Astra's banter, that is 100% often lifted from exact conversations Becca and I have had.
Oh my God, that's fantastic. That is so fun. I love what can come out of just like playing around with it. So I guess I'm still trying to picture it more too. This is so cool the way you work together. And it sounds like you have such a good system to keep track of everything. So are you working, when you're going back and forth writing for your characters, are you sitting there with an outline that you've already gone through? Like, how are you basing, okay, it's your turn to write, let's put this character in?
So I guess an interesting or maybe easy way to explain it would be like as if you were kind of cosplaying. So like we write out the conversation. We have no idea where the conversation is going to go. We know they have to talk about this. Maybe. We might know that. We might not. And so it's kind of each of our characters are reacting, and we're kind of really getting in the mindset of our respective characters. And so this has happened before. Astra said something which neither of us has expected, and then it's like, well, Luco's now going to say this, and so now this is going to happen, and this wasn't going to happen before, and it just unfolds very naturally. I don't know if does that help answer your question?
It does. That's really cool to picture too. I mean, that just sounds so fun. I wish I could be like a fly on the wall watching you have these conversations and just see it like, the light bulb go on like, oh yeah, that's what's happening. I find that so interesting, that process that you have. It sounds so unique and it just seems to work so well too. That's amazing. Did you develop it that way from the start, or is it something that you just kind of found like you had to work at to say, oh no, okay, let's do it this way?
I think it evolved from the fact that we used to email each other stories, because what would happen is we obviously email and you'd say what your character did, and then you'd send the email, and then the other would reply. And so it almost was like by emailing it, it was more of like if our characters were having this email conversation rather than us. And I think it kind of, that's how it turned into. And the email started because obviously we were 12 and couldn't spend all day at each other's house every day. So we were like, but we still want to tell the stories. And so that's how the email started. So it just kind of evolved, I guess.
And how did you pick who was in charge of each character? Did you felt like you had a certain connection with one over the other?
So most of our characters, I don't want to say predate, but kind of predate the current series. Like Niamh talked about, we sort of had these separate ones and we combined them. So like when we first started, it was just Ent, and Niamh was telling me about Ent, and after I made her like tell me about it for like 3 hours, she's like, okay, this is boring, you tell me something. And that's how Astra was invented, kind of just on the spot, going with it. And we're like, well, what if they were in the same one? And then we kind of build from there. So usually as we add a storyline or put it in, it's usually one of us had come up with that, and maybe the other contributes something or brings it in. We've always kind of felt our way through. Sometimes we'll start and we have this side character that doesn't really belong to either of us, but then one person really connects. We're like, yeah, that one's yours. I can't write this one. It never comes off right. So we kind of play it as it comes.
Love it. And then I'm noticing too, I know I started reading it, but you're mentioning the character Ent. And then you've also mentioned elves. And as someone who loves fantasy, my mind kind of goes a little bit to Lord of the Rings. So I wanted to know, are you like Lord of the Rings fans? Is there a little bit of like homage to that, or is it just me going off the rails?
I mean, we absolutely love Lord of the Rings. I will say, our elves are not like Lord of the Rings elves. And it was an homage in the sense of we're going to break everyone's expectations with what they think elves act, and because of that. But yeah, we love Lord of the Rings. And we got a lot of the inspiration because of the way that he did lore. So he has a ton of lore in his, that not necessarily you see, but that he created. And that's, I think, was a lot of the inspiration to have a lot of the lore in our heads and the history, so that we could understand like the world better.
That's fantastic. I can definitely see that coming through, like the details and just all that you have made up already. That's amazing. And then something else I wanted to touch on too that you mentioned, you call your magic gifting, which I think is so cool. What was the inspiration behind using that term instead of magic?
Some of it is really just the broader application. So if you have going back to our shapeshifting race, shapeshifting is an entirely different ability from healing, but they're all coming from the same source of power. And so it's this gift, it's a gifted person that you see. And it's, we kind of go off of that. And we wanted sort of that finer term than just broad magic and calling everything magic. We wanted that gift idea, that it's coming from something else, it's coming from another source.
Oh, that's beautiful. Do you have, do each of you have like a favorite gift in your book for a character?
Oh, that's, I've never thought of that. That's a really interesting one. What about you, Niamh? I'm gonna think about that.
Mine's a spoiler, but you know whose gift is my favorite.
Uh-oh, should I save this for the end interview after we
Well, no, mine's a spoiler for like book 4, because you meet this character, but you don't realize what their gifting fully. You don't understand their gifting fully until really book 4, but I think that's probably my favorite one. Becca
So
knows.
now I'm extra excited to read to that point too, to be like, oh, this is what she's talking about. This is so cool.
This does happen a lot with our gifts too. It's if you don't grow them, you lose them, and it's a lot of the different characters that you see are gifted evolve across the series.
Love it. What do you think? Do you have a favorite?
Favorite?
Can you
Mine's
come
a
up with
spoiler
one?
too,
It's a
unfortunately.
spoiler? Okay, I've got to read
And
that.
that's like book 8. I'm sorry.
Oh, that's okay. I do plan at your live event tomorrow, which I'm looking forward to. I'm hoping you'll have book 2 for sale, right? Are you gonna have it with you? Because I'm totally
Yes.
gonna buy that.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep, we have book 2. We're gonna actually there's creatures called drogons, and we actually have the t-shirt with some art that's based off of the drogons and such that we're going to be having signups for. And if you sign up to buy one of those, you get a discount on the book too.
Oh, great. Is that something that members could also buy if they like to, like through your website?
Yes.
Okay.
I think what I'm going to do tomorrow is I'm going to set up a form that you can fill out on the website, and as soon as we get that figured out, I can let Becca know, because Becca runs the Facebook part of it. I think we're probably going to be taking orders until the end of next week.
Okay. Perfect. And if you want, I have members that are just on Facebook sometimes, and I have members that are also just on my YouTube. So if you want to go ahead and list off right now where everyone can find you for our YouTube members, like your website and everything.
Sure. So our website and our official press name is scharareevespress.com. It's SCHARAREEVES press.com. And that's also our Twitter handle and our Instagram and our Facebook page. And our YouTube. We don't have very many YouTube videos up right now, but we're hoping over the summer, this coming summer, that we can start getting that up a little more and be talking about our books, because we'll be further along in the series, so we can start talking about things and people will know what we're talking about. And maybe share some more in depth about our process and like world building processes and character development and how we come across those things. So that they're all the same name.
Okay. Perfect. I'm gonna have to go and subscribe. I'm looking forward to watching those videos that you come out with. That's awesome. I didn't realize you had a YouTube channel, so I'm very excited to go look at it. And I wanted to ask you too about your name, your press name. So how did you end up coming up with that?
So it's actually a combination of our names. My maiden name is Rebecca Panzera. Niamh's is Niamh Schmid. So we took the Schmid and Panzera, became the Shara or Shara. And then the Niamh and the Rebecca became Reeves. And we'd actually considered publishing under a pen name at first, but then when we started having some solo books, we're like, oh, that's gonna get way too complicated. So we've ended up doing it under our own names, but it's our imprint name, the Shara Reeves Press.
Love it. And do you also plan to have your own individual books printed as well? Like, do you have any out already, or do you just have your collective books out currently?
Well, book 2 is actually only Niamh for writing. So that one's out. And then again, I have the Tyron prequel will be coming next spring, and that will be only me. We do have a lot of solo works that will be coming afterwards. We like to have our together projects and then our side projects. But they're all pretty much set in the same universe, whether or not it's the same time period.
Okay. I wasn't sure if you meant you had some offshoots of like other stories of your own, or okay. Like for this series. Okay. And I wanted to mention your logo too for your page. I love it. I think it's so beautiful, and I love that you have like the musical background too. Is that your way of kind of telling the world, hey, we love to write, we love music? Like what went into that?
I think it was a lot of different things. So I don't know, I've seen like tons of writers' logos, and they always have like the little pen and somewhere. So I was like, oh, that looks great. I had drawn a rough draft of the logo. We kind of talked about it, and then we had someone else kind of make a professional version of it. The music Becca added, because a lot of our experience with music and performing and stuff comes into writing, because it's a lot of the same thing. There's development in music, and when you're playing a piece, usually you have to have a character in mind because the piece has a certain mood and things. So we've always seen our music and our writing is very integrated, and it usually plays off of each other and how we develop both of those careers.
I find that interesting. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Zoom is so hard, this lag. The music behind it is actually from a written piece that we made for one of the characters. So that is original music, and it's a little spoilery, unfortunately, but we're going to hopefully put that out once it's not so spoilery.
Oh, that's so neat. So do you have a lot of music that you've made that goes along with your series? Oh, so are you planning on releasing kind of like a soundtrack with it? That would be amazing.
Maybe not a detailed like soundtrack, but we do have a lot of character themes, and that's something we would want to put out. We'll kind of build from there.
That would be really unique and awesome. I love it. I'm sorry, you were going to start talking, and then of course, like the lag we just had to is catching up to us.
I was just going to add that we do occasionally post snippets of character themes on our Instagram and occasionally on Twitter too. So if anyone ever wanted to see, we've done that before. We tend to post a lot of music snippets on our Instagram and sometimes talk about music through that as well. So.
Oh, that's perfect. I'm going to be so busy after this interview. I'm going to be finding all of your pages, following, subscribing, adding the books you're reading currently to my want to read lit. I'm going to be busy. I'm going to be finding you all over and reading your book. I'm excited with what I've read so far, and I just don't want to put it down. So I'm super excited. I don't know if you saw when I held it up. I've got my bookmark in there already. I'm loving it. I can't wait to start chapter discussions. So we'll start chapter discussions. We don't usually make it all the way through chapters, but we kind of go through so we don't get to the spoiler end chapters that we discuss. So each weekday we'll kind of put discussions in there. And I wanted to have you guys talk about the awesome giveaway that you're offering. Thank you so much for offering a giveaway. Did you want to go ahead and mention that for people?
Which one of us is doing that? Me. Oh no. Sorry, I'm like suddenly blanking. We're running like 3 different giveaways now, and I have to remember which one this is.
Oh no, which one for us?
That's why I was having you, because I had the same.
You did the same
giveaways
okay,
going.
I feel better. It's hard when you've got the one thing right after another, but
well, you guys are busy. You're always putting out, like, you know, getting ready to put out your next book. You're doing a lot of promotion right now. I mean, that's fantastic what you're keeping up with, and you're not, you know, you've got school and stuff during the day too. I mean, you guys are keeping up with a lot.
I remember correctly, what we're looking for is anybody who's read book 1 or has bought book 1, will enter them into a raffle to get a free signed copy of book 2. But
yes, we have 2 members already that have already kind of commented that they bought your book, the ebook version. So we've already got at least 2 entries. So members, keep letting us know when you got the book, when you ordered it. And then your name will automatically be entered into the raffle. I'll be keeping track. So just let me know here in the YouTube comments or on our Facebook group comments, and then you'll be entered. So this has been absolutely fantastic. I've had so much fun talking with you both, and I can't wait to finish reading the book and talk with you again at the end of the month with more questions. So thank you so much for your time. This has been so much fun.
And thank you. This has been great.
Yes, thank you so much. We love nerding out about our books. It's so.
I love nerding out about your book with you too. I loved all the details. Thank you so much, and thank you everybody for watching. Happy reading.